Moments of inspiration mixed with time to network, IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrating Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat at ibj.com/RSVP.
Off the Record with the Indiana 250 is presented by Prolific. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
This has been the instinct in higher ed, but I've seen it in every other context. Every failing product manager, every losing political candidate, every struggling institution, there are people say, we're just not telling our story. If those great unwashed out there only understood. No, it's, as I used to tell our marketers all the time, it's the steak, not the sizzle. You have to change your behavior in meaningful ways that the public can see you're sincere. They're not ornamental. We're not just going to stick this little civics institute over here and say we've solved our ideological conformity problem. We're not going to just have a little scholarship program over here and pretend that for the broad number of our students, we're serious about making this place more affordable and therefore more valuable.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Welcome to a special conversation with former Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels on the value and values of higher education. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO and publisher of IBJ Media. My conversation with Governor Daniels was recorded on stage at IBJ Media's Education Power Breakfast, where he focused on one of the biggest questions facing students, families, employers, and universities. What is the value of a college education? Governor Daniels brings a rare perspective to that question. He served 2 terms as governor of Indiana from 2004 to 2012, and later served as the 12th president of Purdue University from 2013 to 2022, where he made affordability a defining priority. During his tenure, Purdue froze tuition and mandatory fees after 36 years of consecutive tuition hikes, reduced room and board costs, and saw aggregate student borrowing fall 37%. Before serving as governor, Daniels held senior roles in Washington and the private sector, including Chief of Staff to Senator Richard Lugar, Senior Advisor to President Ronald Reagan, Director of Office of Management and Budget under President George W. Bush, CEO of the Hudson Institute, and of course a top executive at Eli Lilly and Company. To learn more about his history, please listen to our previous interview with Mitch here on the Indiana 250 podcast. In this episode, we will focus more on Governor Daniels' view on higher education. At Purdue, Daniels helped launch efforts to rethink the role of business education, civic education, and the humanities in preparing students not just for their first job, but for their lives of judgment, character, and leadership. In this conversation, Governor Daniels makes the case that skepticism about college costs is justified, that students should examine multiple pathways after high school, and that the universities must prove their value if they want to gain and regain public trust. In this conversation, Governor Daniels makes the case that skepticism about college cost is justified, that students should examine multiple pathways after high school, and that universities must prove their value if they want to regain public trust. We also discuss workforce preparation, civic formation, student debt, faculty tenure, artificial intelligence, college sports, and the future of the traditional campus. We begin with the question many families are asking: is a 4-year college degree still worth the investment? But I just want to jump right in and first talk about the value of a college education. So, a little hypothetical here. If you were speaking directly to a skeptical 17-year-old today, debating about whether he or she should go to college, would you tell he or she it's worth the 4-year investment and taking on significant debt, or how would you help them analyze this issue?
I would tell them their skepticism is justified. They ought to ask these questions, they and if the family who's likely going to support whatever comes next for them. that before they take that leap, they need to examine a range of options, including non-4-year route. You know, we spent I don't know, a generation or more in this country persuading ourselves that that was the passport to a successful life, the conventional 4-year degree, and that's proven not to be the case. And meanwhile, the economy's moving out from under us in ways that I don't pretend to fully understand. So, yeah, I think that just as many young people for the last couple decades would have probably been wiser to find another pathway, always a pathway after high school, but not necessarily the one that we preach so relentlessly. Then since it will be the right choice, hopefully for this hypothetical young person, then where to go. And there we've learned some things over time. We did a thing with Gallup. This is now 12 years ago or something. Remains the biggest survey of college graduates. And it tries to interpolate backwards. What about their college experience seemed to contribute to well-being, not just economic, but social, health, and all the rest. And the one sentence conclusion was, what matters isn't where you go, it's how you go. So the other piece of advice would be around, how to make the most of it.
So, of course, there's enormous pressure today on colleges and universities to produce workforce-ready graduates. So, as you're thinking about this today, how should colleges and universities think about balancing that vocational preparation, being ready to take that first job, versus what are broader intellectual development, such as analytical thinking skills?
It's a very important question. And I think you start by saying everyone in this room knows you have to start by trying to understand what the market is seeking. Whatever what you want to sell may or may not be what the market wants to buy. And yes, readiness for productive economic life comes first with young people, and for my money, it should. So they ought to go to a place that will prepare them for at least that first job in what is likely to be a career of more changes than they can anticipate. But the rest of it's important too. And we certainly worked on it at my last place of employment. There's a lot of clutter in the average college catalog. A lot of courses that I don't think serve either of those purposes. And the way to have it both ways, I believe, is to help young people find an area of concentration, a major, that is likely to be related to their employment, at least the launch of their employment life. But also, we need young people to read a lot more, write a little bit. And here we need our K-12 system, as in so many other respects, to do a better job than it's doing. But since it's not, too often, I'm a big proponent of, and we offered packages at Purdue that can supplement even the most STEM-based major with a degree of, we hope, a critical thinking improvement. So,
I want to talk a little bit about that. And question is, beyond producing workforce-ready graduates, colleges used to be known as places that would play a big role in the development of character and the understanding of what it means to be a good citizen. This gets to the values part of the values of higher education. You, of course, developed coursework at Purdue that focused on this directly, and other colleges and universities now seem to be adopting some of these ideas, new centers that are focused on civic engagement and civil society. Talk a little bit about the values aspect of a college education.
Most of certainly a lot of the private schools that we're so proud of in this state came into being for exactly that reason, to prepare young, generally at the time, men, for lives of character and virtue. Over recent decades, to be honest, many schools, or the people who taught in them, found that quaint and old-fashioned, and either thought that they should be value neutral, or worse yet, taught a set of values very different than the ones that some of us think made this country what it is. No, I think there has been a turning. The revulsion, really, of so many of our citizens, that plummeting confidence in higher ed has to do a lot with values, what people thought our young were being taught there or not taught, as much as it did the cost versus the quality of what they were receiving. So I'm encouraged by some of these developments, although we have to watch and wait and see if they're just ornamental, if some institutions are doing a little something, mark a little time till the heat blows over and they go back to doing what they were before. But I think they will disserve the country if they do that, and probably not serve their own long-term interests very well.
We've had a lot of emphasis in this country on STEM learning, and at this point, how are you feeling about the humanities? Are we overemphasizing STEM and underemphasizing the humanities, or is that concern overstated from your perspective?
I just don't think it's an either-or choice. I guess I just made a brief reference a minute ago to this. At Purdue, I ask our liberal arts. First of all, let me say, I think Purdue's value and service to the state starts with its STEM excellence, and they are turning out more STEM graduates by the conventional definition than any school in the country, possibly Texas A&M up there with us. So engineers, computer scientists, bioscientists, all that. And that's we're the land-grant school for this state, and this is really the moment for schools like that. Now, I can't, first of all, I don't think, we don't think that you can lead a business or a scientifically oriented entity these days without an ability to communicate, an ability to share what you know with others, to speak in front of a group, to lead a team. I heard over and over during my Purdue years from businesses. We were the most recruited campus in the country. And over and over I would hear people say, "We love your graduates. They've learned what they've actually learned what the diploma says they know," which they can't trust in all cases. And they show up ready to work. They're not entitled, it's not what are you going to do for me, it's how do I add value. They said it would be nice if they could share what they know a little more effectively. So we've tried to work on that. And a very high percentage of the 70% now, up to 70% of Purdue students who major in something you would call STEM, are as their elective package, are taking a humanities-rich program we call Cornerstone, which has been copied in a lot of other places. So I just don't think we can afford to treat it as one or the other.
So Mitch Frazier mentioned this. Of course, you famously froze tuition at Purdue University after 36 years of consecutive tuition hikes. And under your tenure, the aggregate student borrowing fell 37%. And when you stepped down from Purdue, it cost less to attend Purdue than when you started. Incredibly impressive stats. So when we talk about the ROI of a college degree, in your view, what responsibilities do colleges and universities have to students in terms of the cost of higher ed? Should schools be on the hook when grads can't get a job and have amassed, for example, $100,000 of debt?
Yes. Maybe not for the whole amount. It wouldn't take the whole amount. I've been a believer and a proponent in, let's say, an at-risk system. These schools have dined out very, very well for a long time on the student loan programs. One of the worst domestic disasters we've built and created and then misadministered. So from end to end, it's one of the bigger failings of our federal government. But anyway, one of its downsides has been that it made it so much easier for schools to keep raising their prices. I think finally people have understood and caught on to that. And so, if you're turning out lots of students who turn out not to be attractive to employers, not to be too productive, then the school ought to pick up at least some of it, as opposed to passing the whole tab on to the taxpayer. And believe me, it wouldn't take a lot, 5, 10, 15%. First of all, the embarrassment factor of audiences like this noting that certain school had to pay back a lot. And secondly, the at the margin, those dollars would be significant. So yes, it would be both, I think, appropriate and effective.
I think the average, if I've got read preparation today, that the average student debt takes 20 years to pay off, and that's just the average. So having some at-risk component going back to the university might make sense.
One thing we launched at Purdue, and the federal government eventually, an administration ago, killed the ability for us to do it, was called income share agreements. And these, I still think, is a great long-term, can be a long-term answer to this problem. If you're not familiar, I'll sum it up. It's equity, not debt. So institutions or individuals can, in essence, fund a college education in exchange for an agreement. It's a contract that says that the graduate will pay a fixed percent, a specified percentage for a specified number of years of whatever their income is. So if their income is zero, the investor loses. The risk shifts entirely to the investor. Milton Friedman suggested that 70 years ago, and sooner or later we'll move to more of that model, or should.
So here's a question from the audience that unless you're in line to go back to Purdue, maybe you'll be at ease to answer this one. What is the governor's experience with and thoughts about faculty tenure as a cost in managing the overall expenses at college?
I'll start by saying that if you were starting a college today, which I do not recommend, you wouldn't draw it up that way. In fact, the few who have started new schools, nobody has that sort of arrangement. Now, it's very important to protect academic freedom, but there are other ways to do it. Term contracts, 5 years, 10 years, with an honest appraisal at the end, and a clear understanding at the beginning that if the demand side has moved, if the market has moved, and you're teaching something nobody wants to study anymore, you're not entitled to stay there where you are forever. Where we have it, you have to honor obligations that were made years ago. But I think the schools everywhere, in some cases, leaned on by their public authorities. In the case of public universities, are crab walking away from it.
We have a lot of people in the audience who serve on boards of trustees at universities in our state, or highly engaged universities. I'm wondering, when it comes to affordability and the things that you learned or saw in your decade at Purdue, are there one or two tips in terms of what to look for, where there's opportunity for cost savings?
Well, first of all, I think we can assign a very large portion of the blame for things that have gone amiss in higher ed to boards of trustees who did not do their job. And I've just said so often, I've observed so often, some of the hardest-fisted, smartest, toughest-minded business people and professionals that I ever knew, put them on a board at dear old alma mater, and they go all squishy, just whatever you want. And so those of you who are trustees, this is really the time to make sure you are doing exactly the sort of diligent job that you would do, that you probably do on corporate or other boards on which you serve. Show that you love the place by pushing to make it better. They'll still give you the 50-yard line seats. So that's number one. You say a tip or two. Yeah, sure. I mean, you ask questions like, what's our ratio of administrators to faculty? What's our ratio of administrators to students? And what are we doing to shrink that so that we can concentrate the resources where they matter most? And, I think finally circumstances took way too long, have inverted. The question trustees used to ask themselves, including at our place, was, okay, how much will we raise it this year? Because it was so easy to do. It was the answer to everything. Somebody should have been saying, what would we have to do to avoid that? And now, slowly ground down by the difficulties of the moment, you see more and more boards at least asking that question.
Well, today we hear that jobs of the future will require critical thinking, and often college is associated, of course, with obtaining those skills. Yet we also see that unemployment seems to be ticking higher for recent college grads. I would love to get your sense of what you think is happening right now for new grads. Are we beginning to see the impact of AI, for example, on certain positions that may formerly have gone to recent college grads?
We're surely going to. I think it may be not as fast or as deep as some have feared. Right now, I think the last number I saw is 5% of the last class or recent classes unemployed. But this room is full of people who could give you a better answer to what this is ultimately going to mean or quickly going to mean. I really think it's highly likely that the campus of tomorrow or the day after tomorrow will have to look very, very different to accommodate this, once in a millennium event.
So here's a question from the audience. This person happens to be in the current class of the Mitch Daniels Leadership Foundation. I know near and dear to your heart. I won't call out his name, Tyler. So higher education is facing a crisis of confidence from the public and in state legislatures. What top-level advice would you give to higher ed writ large to improve its public perception and reassure the public of its value? And we've been talking a lot about those things already, of course, but what he states, of course, is true with the legislatures in particular.
I don't think it's the implication of this question that somehow this is a PR thing. But this has been the instinct in higher ed, but I've seen it in every other context. Every failing product manager, every losing political candidate, every struggling institution, there are people who say, we're just not telling our story. If those great unwashed out there only understood. No, it's, as I used to tell our marketers all the time, it's the steak, not the sizzle. No steak, no sizzle. So, you have to change your behavior in meaningful ways that the public can see are sincere. They're not ornamental. We're not just going to stick this little civics institute over here and say we've solved our ideological conformity problem. We're not going to just have a little scholarship program over here and pretend that for the broad number of our students we're serious about making this place more affordable and therefore more valuable. And one other one which no one has solved yet, and we worked on it for 10 years. Purdue's done more than this than anybody else I know right now. I used to say it was just an impromptu comment early in my time there when somebody asked me a question like this, what do you have to do? And I said, higher education at the highest proven value, and I never improved on those 7 or 8 words. And proven, so we talked about highest value, both keeping the cost down, making the quality as rigorous, and we haven't talked about grade inflation here and, people skating through with, 4.0s they didn't earn and so forth. But proven. And at Purdue University, every year a representative sample is drawn of the freshman class, and they are asked to take there are instruments that purport to measure critical thinking skills. You read a paragraph and you have to, what'd you read and, comment on it, things like that. And then we draw a sample of the graduating seniors and hope to find that the chart goes up. But higher ed needs to do more of that if it wants full confidence from people that the price is fair in return for the quality of what is being delivered. Don't just take our word for it.
Well, I wrote this question before of the news yesterday, but it's certainly applicable even more so today, and that is, how do you think education has changed in just the few short years since you left the presidency? What would be different about your approaches to either of those jobs today versus when you assumed those roles? And then the audience question ties directly in. Thoughts on the needs for the next president of Purdue?
Well, it's changed fundamentally for the same reason that everybody's business here either has or is about to change. And you read about this all the time. You don't need me to, at the most superficial level, people using AI to cheat and so forth. This was already an issue. We already had algorithms and systems that tried to find plagiarism and so forth. Been fighting this for a while, but now it's gone up a quantum level. The university I attended, I was very proud of this, had an honor system. They just gave it up because with not a proctor in the room, there's evidence that 30% or something are cheating, which also goes back to that character question you ask. Where did the young people get the idea that that's okay if you can get away with it, right? And so, but that's just the thin end. I read an article yesterday. Someone's a faculty member speculating that there's just no reason to have an institution. You could establish a one-to-one relationship with a teacher of some kind, could be a professor or somebody else, who teach you everything you need to know about what you think you want to do, without having to, go to all the expense and so forth. So, I think universities, to remain relevant, will have to double down their efforts at value, and secondly, make certain that the overall experience that young people are having is helping them form not just character but other habits in other ways. There's a lot of good work going on. Claire and other people here know more than I do. You'll hear from some of these folks, Jamie and others. It's really clear to me that young people today need more work experience. Somewhere I took my eye off it, but a declining percentage of high schoolers have a job. I mean, this is where you learn some basics that you shouldn't have to pay tuition to learn, like show up on time, don't look like a slob, right? Don't turn away a customer because you act like an idiot. And so
your comments are really hitting home. I just had a son graduate and a little worried about him. You can't watch this, but no, he can't be.
But I think you're seeing much more of that. One reason, a big reason, that Purdue University asked, and thank you, President Whitten, for working with us on this, to separate down here in Indianapolis, so we can provide more internships, co-op experiences, more work experiences from a broader range of businesses than we could at West Lafayette.
Well, I want to touch on the Mitch Daniels School of Business at Purdue. You've said it's a school that has at its core a belief, quote, a belief in free institution, free markets, and believes that both moral and the effective way to lift people up in a free society. And it does feel like there's something different about this business school. Can you talk a little bit about why it may be a little different from other business schools?
Well, we intend for it to be, and I think it's on its way to being, and I regret that it is different. When the board and I agreed that ought to be the next big investment for Purdue, I checked around the country because I'd heard some disquieting things, and I found out that there's reason for concern that the business schools out there either were just so technocratic, so sterile, so void of any a sense of what has made this such a prosperous, successful society, or worse still, we're preaching a gospel that was antithetical to it. And so I said to the board, I've checked around, and I'm convinced that the country can have it tolerate at least one pro-business business school. And to be more serious about it, young people today, I said, haven't read much of anything, and so they don't know much history, and therefore they really don't know much economic history. So the students there, they're going to learn to read a spreadsheet. They're going to learn to use AI as effectively as anybody, and all the basics. But they're also going to read some Adam Smith. They're going to read some Karl Marx. They're going to read some the history of how the world got to this richest place anyone's ever imagined, and they'll make up their own mind as to what system is best produces that. But for those of us who think the evidence is irrefutable that free institutions are the engine for lifting people from the bottom to successful lives, if that's what you care about, upward mobility and hope for those who start without much, then you are led to a conviction that we need to protect free institutions and that they work better. And so at least students there will be exposed to that. And, I hope most of them will see the evidence the way I do.
It's important that the CEOs of the future understand how to defend the free market system.
Yeah, because there are enough people out of self-interest, frankly, the lust for power, whatever it is, that are eager to try to tear it down and disparage it. But people in business need to talk back. Look, I understand why you don't. You don't. This is not what you went into business for, to have arguments with people. But when people are assaulting the basis of the system in which you are trying to build and grow and help others, then you're entitled, and I think duty bound to argue back.
Yeah. So Central Indiana and the state are, of course, leaning into the biosciences. Some more recent announcements. You, of course, were a longtime executive of the Eli Lilly and Company that's celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. The state has announced $1 billion investment over the next decade in this sector. Yet Indiana's college going rate has dropped significantly, certainly since you were a governor. Now it's 52%. When not too long ago, during your times, it was over 60. Is Indiana in danger of having too few college graduates over the next decades to fill these high-paying jobs that we say we want?
Look, I'm as big an advocate of higher education, well delivered, as anybody in the room. But I think we got to lose this idea that credential is the sole passport. Now, the fantastic success of my former company, I was there. I was in part of the celebration the other day. I caught myself again. 25 years later, I still speak in the first person. We this, we that. But discounting for that, they're a fantastic asset to the state. I remember when we weren't doing too well for a while in the 90s. Somebody asked the then mayor, Steve Goldsmith, "What about these rumors that somebody might buy Lilly?" And the mayor said, "God would not let that happen." Yeah, like everybody here should still feel the same way. Now, this fantastic facility that they're building up here, up the road at Lebanon, Purdue's going to be a part, Ivy Tech's going to be a part of training people for that facility. The semiconductor plant that we've recruited to the boundary of Purdue from Korea, same thing. There'll be lots of high-paying jobs in those facilities that don't necessarily require, a 4-year degree. If we can deliver to young people, this could be the alternative pathway that doesn't cost them a couple $100,000.
Yeah, I'm going to close with a question from the audience. With NIL, is college sports having a major impact? Having a major impact on the athletic department's fiscal well-being, what do you think is the best approach to protecting Olympic sports programs that are beginning to be cut?
Well, you don't have enough time for me to answer this quick. I've spouted off on this. I've written about this. I think it's highly unfortunate what's happened. I understand. I don't dispute the arguments that say that a young person ought to be able to make money based on their skills and fame. And so that's all settled, and we're not going back. What you have now, at least in Division I, is, in my opinion, is entities who have decided, consciously or not, that this is an essential marketing tool. We got to have a winning team somehow, or nobody will enroll here. I think that's untested and possibly fallacious, but that's what they've decided. I think it's pernicious in more than one way. First of all, it is hurting the ability. You have non-revenue sports closing in many schools. Second, it's cannibalizing money. Don't tell me that when a school, I won't name anybody, spends $30, $40, $50 million on players, that some of that money couldn't have been raised for the new chemistry lab or to subsidize or to buy down the cost of some non-athlete's college education. It's not a fix for anything, but I think, and I've asked some real lawyers this question, this revenue ought to be taxed. Much of it is not. It's still treated as a donation, tax-exempt donation to what? An education institution. And then it pays some kid who never goes to a class. It has nothing to do with education. So at a minimum, the fans and the taxpayers should and get a little return out of what we've done here. But the toothpaste is not going back, and it's entertaining and it's wildly successful commercially. And as I keep saying, I understand it. Won't try to talk anybody out of it. Just please don't call it college sports.
Well, I know you were excited about IU winning the national championship, though, right? Come on, you had to be. As governor,
it's a great story. No, it is. Who doesn't love underdogs, and who doesn't love teams out of nowhere? Of course. So hats off, absolutely.
Well, Governor, can't thank you enough for the engaging conversation this morning.
Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls. The message blends in, the site stops converting, the pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com.